Water quality is even more important than it ever was before to manage it well in the context of all the other disturbances we are seeing in the reef. So our NESP project focuses very much on developing benthic light as an additional indicator for water quality. We've developed indicators for sediments, turbidity and chlorophyll in the past. But light is obviously depth dependent and critically important for ecosystems. Photosynthetic organisms need light, but so you've got the additional depth component in it, which we haven't got in the previous water quality indicators. And we've got the variability that Line focused on as well in terms of additional source of stress. So just as a background, Benthic irradiance, it's not only a factor of what's happening in the water column, but it's also, first of all, how much light is coming in. The second one would be then what's happening in the water column as the light penetrates down to the seafloor. And then it extends as a function of water depth, as a function also of the reflectivity of the seafloor, and finally of the angle of the organism or the surface you're finding at the bottom. So it's a very complex multifactorial setting that determines how much light an organism will get on the bottom of the seafloor. And so we are very much referring to remote sensing to make sense of all these complexities. The processes that are happening in the atmosphere are pretty much well known, and our focus is very much on what's happening in the water column here. So interestingly, the incoming light is much more benign in the far northern Great Barrier Reef than in the south. We've got huge differences in winter irradiance from north to south, with the south having a low light availability in winter when the corals are challenged because of low temperature as well. And we've got higher light availability in the south in summer when the corals are stressed from high temperatures as well. So the differences between summer and winter are actually quite pronounced. In the north, it's only 20% seasonal differences, whereas in the south, it's more than 60% difference between summer and winter. And that's partly due to the sun angle and day lengths, but it's also a matter of cloud cover in the different regions. So to not only model the incoming light, but also measure it, we developed at 4 stations, Heron Island, Yongala, Milverton and Palm Passage, light loggers that are away from optically shallow waters. So these are loggers that are deployed at the IMOS mooring stations away from reefs, and IMOS has been doing a great job in developing the brackets, deploying those sensors, maintaining them both on the surface and at 26 meters depth, so we can look at light attenuation and incoming light in different parts of the Great Barrier Reef. And that is used to validate our benthic light algorithm for the remote sensing data, as well as validate the data for EVs. So that's one of the examples of the light profiles you would get. So it's a light at above the surface levels. Yes, you do have cloudy days and so on, as you expect, but you also have a profound light attenuation at 26 meters depth, which are due to the properties of the water column. So obviously days and days where the light is very, very low at 26 meters depth, which are not always reflected on the surface. And so we've got 4 times stations now, 8 time series of these data, which will be valuable for seagrass and other places as well, because we are away from optically shallow waters where turbidity is affected by the bottom light. So at Yongala in particular, lowest irradiance tends to be in March to July. Why is that? This is not only a day length factor, but it must be properties of the water column and cloudiness. And we're in the process of pulling apart what determines the low light at these critical months. and the relative contributions of those factors. So they very much match the runoff of the Benthic River, which tend to peak in these months, and they also match the remote sensing photic depth data we've seen in the past, that run of the Benthic River reduces water clarity up to 6 months into the dry season through processes of resuspension and retention of the sediments in the water column. So a critical time and the most variable time actually is in those 5 months between March and August, and our water quality indicator based on benthic light will focus on those 5 months rather than on the less variable remaining years. We are making progress in developing the Benthic irradiance indicator from remote sensing data. So this is our Yongala station, and photic depth determined from MODIS data. But that work is still work in progress. It's actually quite complicated. There's lots of factors involved, and because of the illness of Scarlet Week, we had some delays in progressing on that front. But it's now coming together really nicely, thanks to student Marie Descanto and Lachlan McKenna, who are bringing all these different factors of incoming light, optical properties of the water, and the match-ups of the PAR and the validation that all have to come together to make use of those data. So Lachlan has shown in the past that the bottom reflectance actually determines the amount of light an organism on the seafloor is seeing. So the benthic albedo is actually very, very important and does get incorporated into estimates of benthic light from the satellites that we are using. So we are in the process of developing the methods for Yongala for March to July, and we are then upscaling to the whole Great Barrier Reef, and that will give us access to 14 years of data on a daily basis at a 1 kilometer resolution. So hopefully a very, very rich source of data to assess individual time events like the bleaching events, individual regions of interest like downstream of the Benthic River and so on. And what does benthic light actually do to the organisms? So the second component of this project is to really work out what makes a sensible indicator, and we were very much focusing, after reviewing a lot of data and previous studies and information, we're very much focusing on using Acropora as the organism we like to protect in this guideline. Acropora is a very important reef-building coral species. It is a habitat for lots of other species because it's quite often very complex morphology. It is highly sensitive to high light because of bleaching, but it's also sensitive to low light. And we know that from a global survey of museum specimen that Acropora basically does not exist in an area where benthic light is below 5.2 moles fulgens per square meter per day in the winter. So we've got some indication that really Acropora, which is such an important organism, is probably the best benthic response parameter we can think of. And we've also shown in the past really that Acropora is very, very strongly correlated to secchi depths and can indeed be used as one of the water quality indicators for the Great Barrier Reef, as tested for in the Whitsundays. So these are Acropora cover on a square root scale, so an exponential increase in Acropora cover with increasing water clarity. And also the ratio of Acropora cover to total coral cover is responding very strongly to water clarity, here measured as secchi depths. So we took that information and used it for experimental work in CSIM, and we run 2 experiments focusing on high light, medium light, low light, and variable light, where light variability basically varies from day to day. So we still ramp up during the morning, have high noon irradiance, and ramp down in the afternoon. But in those variable treatments, we've got low light days followed by a ramp day, followed by high light days, and so on. So that basically simulates the resuspension events we are seeing in the water column, where periods of windy conditions resuspend the water, the sediments from the bottom, reduces light for a few days, and then it drops down again and shades the corals. So we used initially 2 species, Pachycetus speciosa and Acropora millipora, showed how some coral species are really upregulating and downregulating their photosynthesis in response to light availability, but Acropora doesn't. Acropora is dead flat, it cannot photoacclimatize to a varying light level very much at all. Not at timescales of 20 days as the first experiment showed, and not at timescales of 50 days as our second experiment showed and I'll show it to you in a minute. Importantly, the growth rate of Acropora also is very much a function of light. Low light, medium light, and high light basically are linearly leading to increasing growth rates in that coral. We repeated that experiment on 2 other species of Acropora, and again we found a linear relationship between light availability and Acropora growth for both species. And in the intermediate light, it did not matter whether light was constant and in between or variable in between. Importantly, the corals, the more light they had, the more they grew, and every day of low light accumulated to lower growth rates, and in the end, smaller colony sizes. So every day counts basically in the life of these corals. Every day of more turbid conditions reduces the final colony sizes in those communities. And a 40% light reduction resulted in 40% growth reduction, 8% light reduction resulted in a 70% growth reduction in these corals. So real cumulative effects over time. And that's what brings us into every bucket counts, because we've shown in the past a very strong linear relationship between the annual river discharges in all parts of the Great Barrier Reef and the mean annual water clarity in all parts of the reef. And that's just for North West tropical and South West tropical regions here, from a publication from the NERP work we've done in the past. Linear relationships between annual river discharges and annual mean photic depths. So strong linear relationships even to the outer shelf reefs, with every year where we had increasing amount of suspended solids in the rivers, declining the water clarity throughout the year. And through those linear relationships here to linking part to Acropora growth, we can then conclude that every year where water clarity is better, our Acropora growth is better, and we are likely to increase coral growth and coral cover. It's not from our data in the field, it's not just even a linear relationship, but probably coral recruitment plays into the whole system as well. We're finding an exponential relationship between water clarity and Acropora cover. So somehow things are scaling up in the field, probably not only growth but also recruitment is playing a role. And if you upscale to the whole Great Barrier Reef, that any change in Secchi depths from, let's say, from 10 to 12 meters would increase Acropora colonization depths from 12 to 15 meters. And that's another 43 million Acropora colonies on the GBR, just if you take the reef slope in account in the GBR. Now, it's not a huge number in the context of the GBR having probably about $8 billion colonies, but it's still a significant amount if you think about it. So I'm getting a lot of feedback still from our 2012 paper, where we showed that coral cover on the GBR had declined by 50% between over 27 years. At that time, we had data for coral thorns, bleaching, and storms, and attributed the decline in coral cover to those 3 main disturbances. And people keep asking me, so does water quality not matter? I would argue it matters even more than ever, because low light, sediments and nutrients, they don't cause the acute coral mortality that we've shown in that declining coral cover paper, where we really attributed changes to the big drivers. But they do very much slow recovery because they impair coral growth, they also impair coral recruitment, and they lead to macroalgal proliferation. And they increase the depths of reef development, and again, it can lead to millions of corals getting lost, which are probably in the depths area that are very much a refuge for corals in a time of coral bleaching. So these deeper corals are quite important, and they do contribute to the total population of corals we've got in the field. So our linear relationship between annual river discharges and annual mean water clarity, and the linear relationship then to coral growth, really shows that even if the changes are not directly measurable in the present time in terms of declining runoff, it will make a difference for the coral health. And I would also throw in the last thought, water quality is reversible at the time scale of decades. CO2 pollution is irreversible at the time scale of millions of years. And that is a really important thought in the context of coastal acidification, which is a topic we have not really addressed yet so far, except through Sven's paper, who showed that the intra-GBR is acidified 2.5 times faster than the atmosphere and reefs further offshore. Why is that? Because again, nutrients that are coming down the rivers, they are adding to the CO2 load in the system through organic enrichment, through increased respiration of the intra areas, and that is leading to what we're calling coastal acidification. It's a process that is very much unstudied today, but it seems to be happening on the GBR. And again, it's a cumulative effect of water quality and ocean acidification, and that the atmospheric CO2 is combining with the CO2 from benthic respiration, which is fueled by nutrient discharges, to making the intra area more acidic. So real synergistic effects, real combined effects that are opening a management avenue to do something about ocean acidification. Because if you're only reducing the nutrient discharges, you're cutting off that avenue of additional CO2 for the intra areas, and are reducing the pressure on the GBR in the context of climate change. So water quality still matters in many, many ways, and I just encourage everyone to sort of keep working on that issue, because it matters more than ever. Thanks. Any questions?
Katharina. Time for questions. And Christian and then Sean, and these sorts of talks do highlight, of course, we've had the bleaching events. There's a lot of questions about where we should be focusing our activity, and this just highlights the complicated nature of storms and bleaching and water quality, the real need for science to sort out whatever our priorities are, what activities we should be in our priority.
Thanks, Katharina. Very interesting talk. Lots of food for thought. You commented that CO2 is irreversible, and reduction of, let's say, sediment discharge is reversible. It's really a question of time. I mean, you can theoretically reduce CO2 to just as much longer. And I wonder whether, even though it would seem that we can reduce sediment discharge, the time scales involved in actually effectively reducing that. I just wonder how realistic it is, given the long lags between system repair and ultimately, that playing through to improvement in the marine ecosystems. So I just wondered if you could comment a little bit on the relativity of that.
Okay. Yeah. So CO2 in the atmosphere is reversible through geological processes. So it will happen, but it's happening at a time scale of thousands to tens of thousands of years. what is in the atmosphere will be taken up through biota and will be taken up through sequestration into sediments and into the seafloor and through rock weathering. So yes, it is happening, but it's happening at a time scale which is fairly irrelevant at human time scales, where we do care for the next few generations. The linear relationship between water clarity and what's coming down the river every single year, to me, indicates that the GBR does have a fairly effective means to cleanse itself and to bury the sediments that are coming in. Otherwise, we would not get this linear relationship between. I'm sorry, this is really faint, but every single year where there's less sediment coming down the river is leading to an annual mean improved water clarity, up to 20 or 30%. So that shows to me that the legacy from one year to the next is actually relatively minor, especially on inshore to mid-shelf reefs. At the coastal zone, it is longer, and the gradients are weaker, but at inshore to mid-shelf reefs, the gradients are actually quite steep, and we can really make a difference.
Thank you. Sean.
Yeah, how well do you think the new catchment targets that were draft water quality plan incorporate your work as far as the linear relationship between river flows, clarity and coral growth, but also this notion of water quality providing some resilience to climate impacts?
So, yeah.
Clear enough?
I'm not sure. Can you rephrase it?
We just had the new catchment targets come out for Great Barrier Reef catchments all 35 of them. And it's a new approach, new science, it's bringing together both the catchment model and marine model, but it's a model. So there's always flaws there. So I was wondering how well you thought the new 35 catchment targets incorporate work such as your own, but also incorporates the notion of water quality being able to sort of provide some buffer to climate impacts.
So the water quality guidelines in the past were basically constant for the whole GBR. There were no great regional differences, but we're really trying to refine the water quality targets as making it ecologically relevant. And they've really stood up throughout the time. Carol Hunting and a lot of other people, we revisited them over and over and again. Can we do it better? And so far, the data are not exactly available to refine them for individual regions. So at this stage, I think they are ecologically relevant and they are important. I haven't looked at the detail of the targets for individual regions as yet, but they're very much based on the work we've been doing throughout the years. And light is obviously not yet an indicator. We're working on it, but that's not to be delivered until the end of the NESP project.
Have to move on then. Thank you, Katharina.